Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. This video is a little bit different than what I usually do. I'm going to be going over travel nursing, which is what I am. I'm a travel nurse, and the ins and outs of it, how it works, and whether or not it's still worth it if you're thinking about going into travel nursing for 2024. So stay tuned and we'll cover everything that you need to know. First of all, I'm going to say I'm actually very proudly announcing that I'm shooting this on a brand new DSLR camera. I purchased a Canon. I'm very excited. It's my first one. I've slowly upgraded my equipment. If you followed my channel over the last year, from a gimbal to a drone and now an actual camera, because I've been filming everything on my phone up until this point. So this is really exciting. So thanks for all of your support. It's inspired me to actually kind of professionalize myself a little bit more, even though this is just a hobby channel. So the point of this video is travel nursing. Is it worth it? Is it not? I'm going to answer a lot of questions. Before I started travel nursing, there were a lot of false ideas I had in my head about it. I know as a travel nurse, I encounter a lot of staff nurses that have a lot of opinions, or they're kind of mixed up in what's fact versus fiction. So we're going to go over that and decide whether or not it's worth it in 2024. There's legislation, of course, in some states they're trying to push to cap travel nurse pay, which is utterly ridiculous, but that's a story for another day. And in COVID, of course, it was extremely lucrative with all the extra government bonuses that the hospital systems were getting that no longer exist now. But a lot of people are still asking, is it still worth it to travel? Is the money still there? Is it worth it? So we're going to go over all of that in just a second. First things first, though, a little bit of housekeeping. Who should be travel nursing? It's not really recommended for brand new graduate nurses. Most companies, most hospitals will require 1 to 2 years of experience. Usually it's at least 2 years of experience. And when you're looking to pick up travel contracts, most of those facilities are going to require at least 1 year of experience in the field that you're, applying for that contract. And it could be a telemetry unit, it could be ICU, it could be pediatrics, labor and delivery, whatever. So they're going to want experience in that. As a brand new graduate nurse, you're still learning how to be a nurse. You're still learning critical thinking and analytical thinking. You're still going through the muscle memory of giving IM injections or sub-Q or setting up IVs and knowing what's compatible, what's not. So definitely not something that new graduate nurses should go into. Get your 1 to 2 years of experience, preferably 2, and then go from there. Because 2 is generally going to be the requirement anyway that most agencies are looking for when they start picking up contract nurses. Second little bit of housekeeping, licensing. So most states, about 41 of them I think, are actually in what's called a compact, where they've all gotten together and agreed that if you have a nursing license in one of those states, it meets the qualifications and standards for the rest of them respectively. So like my nursing license is in Colorado. Colorado is a compact state. I have the ability to practice nursing in all of the states that are in that compact. Most states are, not all of them. I'm currently on contract in Nevada. Nevada is not a compact state, so you do need a license for Nevada. California is not a compact state. You need a separate license for California. Same with New York and so on. So if you're travel nursing, your agency has an entire department dedicated to licensing and certification, and they will get you through that whole process. It can be tedious, it can be costly because there's expenses, and it's usually falling on you for fingerprinting, background check. There's a third-party company that does the identification, verification, and all that kind of stuff. It sounds all redundant and crazy. And then you actually still have to pay for the license itself. So it gets a little bit tedious, but just know that going in, that if you have a license in one of the states that's in the compact, you're pretty solid. Whereas if you're looking for a contract in a state that's not, get ready, you're going to have to go and apply for a license in one of those states. All good? Sweet. All right, moving on. So first little bit, what company to go with. There's all kinds. There's large, there's small. If you go onto the travel groups on forums or Facebook or whatever, you're going to get a million answers for each different company based on people's personal experience. It's up to you to decide what company you want to go with. My personal recommendation is talk to the recruiters, ask them questions from each company, and a lot of people will actually employ multiple recruiters from multiple companies, and that way they always have options. So if you're going to pursue that, just make sure that you're not like violating some conflict of interest or something to that effect based on company rules. But do your own like interview process when you're shopping around or looking for a company to prospectively work for, and that'll kind of tell you a lot. You'll be able to feel them out and see what you think. And if you click with that recruiter, if you don't like the recruiter, you don't really mix, or they're not answering questions or addressing concerns that you have, by all means request another recruiter or change companies. That's what I did. I started with a different company than what I'm with now, and I wasn't really happy. It wasn't getting my questions answered. There wasn't a lot in terms of feedback, or when it was time to pick a new contract, what do you have? What do you recommend? There's just not a lot coming, and multiple solicitations for assistance from higher ups wasn't being met. So I ended up changing companies. You can do that as well. You're not stuck with one. So just find one that you really like, find a recruiter that you really like, and if you have to, shop around to do so. This is your career and your profession and your money at stake. So you need to be able to be comfortable with who you're working for and really satisfied with what they're presenting to you as employment opportunities. So another big myth we kind of come across is all the money that travel nurses make and it's tax-free. So yes and no. First of all, you do get stipends. That's really where a lot of the money comes from in travel nursing, is your tax-free living stipends. Now there's caveats to that. So you have to maintain a permanent tax home and a permanent home. So there's a difference. Without getting into it, it's complicated, but in terms of the IRS, your permanent home and your tax home are not necessarily the same. Your permanent home is your permanent address. It's where all of your bills go. It's where you're registered to vote. Whereas your tax home or economic home is where you make your money, your income. Some people commute, so they have a different tax home versus permanent home, and some people work in the same area where they live, so it's kind of the same. So you have to maintain that. And again, this is my understanding of it. I could be wrong. If I am, please correct me in the comments. And none of this is intended to be legal advice. Please consult a tax professional if you have questions, or your agency, but this is kind of giving you just an idea. So as a travel nurse, you're not actually permanently moving. You're just taking contracts, temporarily staying in different places. But you have to maintain a permanent home, which is also then your tax home, more or less, your permanent residence, in order to qualify for tax-free stipends. And it has to be a specific, it's not really so much a distance, but it has to be like a situation where it's not really feasible for you to be driving back and forth, like at least an hour, at least 50 miles, whatever. Reasonably, you wouldn't be able to just make this commute every single day. It would be outside of that realm to actually qualify as like a distance or a location that would grant you the ability to collect on the tax-free. There's Virgil. He has to make an appearance. I mean, if you follow my channel, he's part of it. So there you go. But so again, yeah, you've got to have your permanent tax shelter, your permanent home, and it cannot be a post office box. It has to actually be your residence, whether you rent, whether you pay mortgage. That's the situation. And you're duplicating your expenses. And that's why the stipends that you get as a travel nurse are tax-free, because you're basically paying to live in two different places. You're paying your permanent tax home, mortgage, rent, whatever, and then you're paying your outlying living expenses, which would be your rent or your, like I travel in my RV. So I pay RV monthly fees, which is equivalent to rent. And usually water and sewage is included or something like that, but we pay electricity, which is extra. So that's really what it's requesting of you, is that you have to be duplicating your expenses, and you have to be able to prove that. Now, if you want to try and skate by without doing it, that's on you, but I don't really recommend it, because if the IRS does decide to pull an audit, you have to be able to justify that you've been paying duplicate expenses when you're on contract. Otherwise, that's a radar that you really don't want to be on in terms of the government. Contract negotiation. This is a big thing. So let's say you're looking through all of your prospective jobs that your recruiter has pulled for you, and you get to go through and you decide, okay, I'm interested in that, I'm not interested in it, this looks like it, whatever. So you pick a job that you like or a contract that looks appealing to you that you're interested in, and you submit for it. And the facility can go about this a couple different ways. They can want to do an interview with you where they talk to you over the phone and assess your qualifications and see if you'd be a good fit. Sometimes there's something that's called an auto hire or an auto offer, where they will just, auto offer, bring in anybody who's interested in applying for that contract. So 2 different ways that you could go about it. While you're accepting that contract, if they agree to take you on, they will submit an offer for you. So you get your contract, and this is the part where you start doing your negotiations if you're going to do some negotiating, such as, a specific day that you need off or whatever. My personal advice is to be really cautious with negotiating and making too many demands. As a travel nurse, the facility is already paying more money to have you there than they are their staff. And your job as a travel nurse is to fill in the gaps and coverage based on facility needs. So to kind of come across as making all these demands, that doesn't really bode well. And if they kind of determine that you're a bigger pain in the ass than it's worth, they're not going to keep you on. I've seen contracts be canceled for a variety of reasons, and that includes like the travel nurse either not being able to handle the load or copping attitude. I mean, the list is endless, especially nowadays because travel nurses are so expensive to keep on staff to fill in the gaps. They will kind of, they're not going to necessarily tolerate a lot in terms of dealing with the travel nurse and any kind of attitude or ineptitude or something like that. So just something to keep in mind. Some nurses will tell you they're absolutely hardcore and this is how it's going to be. And if they don't like it, they're going to go somewhere else. And that's fine. I haven't ever been canceled from a contract. I've never quit a contract. I don't really recommend it. Again, I just think that that's like not a good mark in your book. I don't think that looks well, and it kind of doesn't impress well upon your company. I really like the company I work for, so I want to make a good impression. I want to leave our facilities with a good taste in their mouths in terms of how we are as a company, how their nurses are. So just going in, I don't make a lot of demands. In fact, I really don't do any because that's my job. I'm going there as a travel nurse to fill in for them. If I want to go do things in the area, which of course I do with my travel videos, I schedule that around whatever they pencil me in. That's not to say as a traveler you won't get a crap schedule. You might get some really hard assignments. That's just kind of par for the course. But again, that's why you're there. That's why you're being paid a lot more than staff nurses. So something to keep in mind. So kind of the last really big question is whether or not it's actually financially worth it. So the truth is contract rates right now are not great. What we're being told is the pre-COVID rates. That's fine and well, except we're not in pre-COVID America. This isn't a pre-COVID economy. Things are exponentially more expensive, and it's just kind of a gamble. A lot of people who have been travel nurses that I encounter are leaving it. Either, they've posted in Facebook groups or whatnot that they're deciding not to travel anymore. They're taking staff positions, or some of my fellow travelers are like, this is probably my last contract. I'm tired of it. I've been doing it for a while, or it's not really worth it to me anymore. So is it worth it? That's kind of something that you have to decide. Even with contracts paying not great right now, it's still a lot more money than I ever made as a travel nurse or as a staff nurse. Sorry. It's a lot more money than I ever made as a staff nurse. Even duplicating expenses. So when I decided I wanted to travel, I bought a new RV, which is my travel trailer, and a year later I bought my truck, brand new, because I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and I was willing to invest to be able to continue doing that. So even with those expenses, those added notes, for me, I can still justify it in that I'm still able to put money to the side. I'm still able to have some expendable income. I'm able to pay my bills, do what I need to. Now, granted, not as much as we used to. They don't pay this well anymore, and we're moving into a really tumultuous year, especially with the election coming up. We're not really sure what the economy is going to do. And hospital systems, it seems like, are really finding less and less reasons to adequately pay staff, which we always knew. And that was true even as, their staff, their core staff, especially not travelers. So whether or not, it's lucrative for you, that's something that you really need to decide based on your individual expenses. If you have a really expensive mortgage, it may or may not be. If you have a working spouse, well, then maybe you have two incomes, so it's a little bit extra. I still think it pays much better than it ever did as a staff nurse. So it's harder, we aren't making the money that we did during the COVID pandemic, but it's still better pay. That said, if you really want to make good money, you have to be willing to travel. I know a lot of people that just do regional travel within their own state. You may or may not get contracts. You have to, as they say, chase the money. The northern states, especially in the winter, are really unpopular. Nobody wants to go where there's like 5 feet of snow. But those contracts tend to pay really well because it's hard to get people to go up there. So that's kind of part of it too, is that you have to decide, how much traveling are you willing to do? Are you willing to go cross country? Do you kind of want to stay in your own region? There are contracts that abound, so there's something for everybody. But determining how much you're willing to go, what distance, that's going to be a huge part of it. And of course, you're away from your family, possibly, unless they travel with you. So, if you can bring them with you, great. A lot of times people can't, so that's something else to consider. You're possibly going to be gone for holidays. Honestly, as a nurse, even as a staffer, if you already work in healthcare, you're probably required to work 2 out of 3 major holidays every year anyway. That was kind of par for the course. That's pretty standard. And at least every other weekend. Again, that's pretty standard in any facility. As a travel nurse, honestly, I've had to work all 3 major holidays and all the minor holidays and a lot of weekends back to back in a row also. Not ideal, kind of sucks, not gonna lie, but again, it's kind of par for the course, and you can make requests to, your employer and the person in charge of staffing, but it may or may not be fulfilled, just as if you were an actual staff nurse. You can make a scheduling request. Doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get it. So there's a lot to kind of consider there too, is distance, travel expenses, and then being away from family. So as far as the trends go, speaking to recruiters, it seems optimistic is what I've been told, is that they're expecting a better year than this year, which is really good because towards the end of this year, the rates have been just what seemed like an all-time low. I was reviewing a couple contracts when considering like the one I'm on now, and the hourly rates were ridiculous. I mean, it was insulting. It was less than I made as a fresh graduate nurse. So, it's a little bit rough. Is there a demand for nurses? There's always going to be a demand for nurses. Are we really in the midst of a nursing shortage? Well, yes and no. Yes. Every hospital I've worked in from one end of this country to the other several times over is short-staffed. Pretty regularly, we are short-staffed on shifts. We don't have enough people. Are there enough registered nurses to cover that? Yes. So this is where it's not entirely true. We have enough nurses. We have enough respiratory therapists and CNAs and all that stuff. The problem is, again, hospitals and administrations don't want to pay. The pay is abominable for the responsibility of people working in healthcare, and a lot of folks just don't want to do it. I think the Board of Labor reported that like 50%, over half of the actual working nurse force is at least 55 years old. So you're talking about a huge chunk of this entire workforce that is pushing close to retirement age. COVID itself was really like a final nail for a lot of people who either took early retirement or after, just given the magnitude of the pandemic. And I worked all the way through it. It was absolutely horrible. That's a video for another day as well. But a lot of people were kind of just basically pushed into retirement after that because it was a lot and they were so close. And then a lot of people left the profession altogether because it was a really rough gig. And to be honest, bedside care, patient healthcare, direct line healthcare is kind of a rough gig. And if you work in healthcare or first responders, you know, like kind of how awful sometimes that job can really be and how it just gets to you. So we have a workforce, we just don't have adequate pay. And there's a lot of professions that can, you know, can say that they're not paid well. I think healthcare is absolutely one of them. The pay for what they want to provide for nurses, CNAs, hospital staff is just, it's subpar in every, you know, every aspect of the word. So all of this kind of ties together. That said, we still need nurses. I'm optimistic based on what recruiter feedback I've gotten, and I like to pull my own recruiter from time to time. I absolutely love her. I've been with her for almost, it'll be 2 years in the spring now. Absolutely love her. And I think you have to have an open relationship with your recruiter. You have to be able to ask them questions. What are we looking at? What's the future looking like? What are our contracts looking like? What are you guys hearing? That's all really important. And at the end of the day, if you decide that traveling is not for you or it's not worth the expense anymore, then there's plenty of PRN positions or staff positions. Hospitals are always hiring, and they are always going to need nurses, because nurses are the primary caregivers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week of patients, giving them medications, implementing interventions and orders from the doctors, doing all the bed changes, toileting, activities of daily living, just direct care from moment to moment. So we will always need nurses. I will always encourage people to go into nursing. It's a fantastic profession. There are many shifts where I ask myself, what the hell was I thinking? This was crazy. What was I thinking? But at the end of the day, I still love my job and I love being a nurse, and I absolutely love traveling, because for me, all of it is totally worth it. I get to go all over the country. I get to work everywhere. And the really awesome part about contracts, they're 13 weeks. I can tough out almost anything, no matter how rough of a job, for 13 weeks. At the end of 13 weeks, I get to go and visit a new place. And it's kind of nice because as a temporary employee, you don't get pulled into office drama. You don't get pulled into water cooler chit chat or, you know, all that kind of stuff. You're just there to do a job, and you do it well, and you represent yourself well and your company. And then you go on to your next contract, and the sky's the limit. You can go anywhere in the United States. Heck, possibly abroad. I don't even know, but there's plenty of options. So hopefully this video has kind of helped a little bit. It's hopefully answered some questions that you have. If there's something I haven't covered, and I know there's tons of it, please ask, comment. Again, if you have questions specifically regarding tax laws or things like that, consult a professional. Talk to your recruiters, talk to your agencies, talk to tax professionals, especially ones who are familiar with travel nursing and the ins and outs of that kind of thing. If you do your own tax stuff like TurboTax, it's probably a good idea to maybe pay the extra levels so that you have protection and, you know, audit representation if anything should happen or whatever. But any questions, again, see professionals on that. But hopefully this has kind of helped you out a little bit. I think it's a great idea. I love traveling. I highly recommend it for anyone interested who's qualified to do it. So if you like this content, and know this is a little bit different than what I usually do, leave a plus or minus or whatever, comments, criticisms, whatever, in the comment section. And hopefully I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for all the ongoing support for my little modest, tiny channel. I hope you've enjoyed it, and have a good one.